No, it was not, which I don't understand why it was such a distraction for so many children. Did you all see the little show that was going on up here? I can't begin to tell you how disappointed I was. I hadn't turned it on yet. So, and now it's just me on here going, sitting here. So, anyways. Sounds good. All right. So, all right, very good. So, hey, good. We are going to look at Nehemiah. Let me just for a minute talk about the next 2 weeks here. We might finish up with Nehemiah tonight, maybe. If we don't finish up tonight, we'll finish up next week. And our plan then will be the following week after that. Do you might know what 2 weeks from tonight is? The farmer's market, which means we're going to be doing that night, okay? So we'll be helping out with that, so we won't have any Bible study. We'll be serving that night instead of learning. So we'll still be here like normal. We'll just be helping with that. We'll need all the help we can get. And then what we'll do then is we'll come back for a couple weeks of, I may hear from you. Anything you may want to study, you got any ideas? And then we'll start an Advent study once we get to Advent. So that's just a little sneak preview of the next couple weeks. That sound good? Sound workable? If I make you guys do work, are you not going to come? All right. Just checking. Nobody raised their hand, so I'm proud of you. All right. According to my person who remembers everything for me, that's Susan. She told me we were up to chapter 6, verse 15. Is that how you all remember it? Way to go, Suze. All right. Here's what we're going to do tonight. We're going to take a look at the completion of the wall and some of the celebration that goes on. But then I found something very fascinating in chapter 7 that we're going to look at that I did not realize, and we're going to have a look at it. So, all right, and we're actually just about a month late because according to the first verse here, what date does it end on there in the very first verse we're going to read, verse 15? October 2nd. Sorry, we're a little bit late. So we're gonna finish on October 25th. All right. So on October the 2nd, the wall was finally finished. 52 days after we had begun. So this massive building project took 52 days. Now, how did Nehemiah pull that off? Very simply, he did it with a lot of help. And we've been looking at it the whole time. Very organized, everybody doing their part. And it's amazing in very practical terms, it's amazing what you can do with a lot of organized help. And he proved that. So 52 days, they got the wall finished. Verse 16, when our enemies and the surrounding nations heard about it, they were frightened and humiliated. They realized that this work had been done with the help of God. It's a pretty, I read this earlier and this went past me. It's a pretty humble statement, isn't it? Because they were frightened and humiliated. And remember, they'd done all this stuff to try to distract him. I mean, they sent threats. They made accusations. They tattletaled to whoever would listen. I mean, they went around and just wreaked havoc as much as they could. And then they come back and remember, this is Nehemiah's memoirs, okay? This is what he wrote down, and that's how he wrote it. He didn't say, man, we kicked those guys' butts. He didn't say, man, we made them look stupid. No. Why were they humiliated? Because we accomplished this, and we did it so effectively, and we did it so well that they couldn't give us credit for it. There was only one person left. They had to recognize that this was the work of God happening. So that upset them. So, free life lesson. I'm throwing this out there for free. If there's something that ever happens and you are against it, which happens from time to time, people look at something, and all of a sudden you realized, oh my, that thing I was against is getting blessed, you might want to think about what side you're on. Okay? Tobias and his boys never stopped to consider that. They only saw what they wanted to see. And when they had to recognize what was happening here, what a mess. I mean, and we're going to find out here they never decided to switch teams. And how do I know that? Verse 17. During those 52 days, many letters went back and forth between Tobiah and the officials of Judah. I also found this statement to be very, very interesting. Okay? Who were, according to what we read in verse 17, who was writing letters? Who were the two entities writing letters to each other? On one side was who? Tobiah. Okay? Now, who was the other side? The nobles and officials of Judah. I want you to notice what it doesn't say there. It doesn't say me. It doesn't say I was writing with him. Okay? So suppose in an alternate reality other than the one that we live in, you heard somebody was upset with the church. And they were writing letters about me. And they were saying, I was writing letters with the leadership team at Wayne Street. So it was between this person, leadership team, and Wayne Street. We cut Pastor Tim out. What might you suspect? What might that make you suspect about the content of the letters? It's obviously about me, all right? And that's exactly what happens here. They're not right. They wrote a couple letters to Nehemiah. They figured out quickly that's not going anywhere. So then we're going to bypass that and go to the leaders and nobles. Okay, and that is 100% exactly what happened. Now, the interesting thing is, though, what was it about Tobiah that made him so important? I mean, the guy obviously thought he was important because he wouldn't keep writing these letters. I mean, even if he decided, you know what, I'm just going to be a selfish jerk and that's what I want to do, eventually that's going to wear thin and wear out. So he must have somehow thought he was justified in what he was doing. He must have made that decision because that's why he continued to write these letters. So that's where he decided. However, and any of you who have ever worked in an organization ever before, you know this. There are a lot of people. Actually, I haven't really run into this at Wayne Street, but I will say other churches I've been in, I've seen this. Where there are people in the congregation who think that they're super important in their own mind, you know, and maybe not so much in reality. That's what they're running into here. Because let Nehemiah tell you why this guy got any respect at all. Who was he? Verse 18. For many in Judah had sworn allegiance to him because his father-in-law was Sakaniah of Era, and because his son, Johanan, was married to the daughter of Meshullam's son of Berechiah. What was it that was important about Tobiah? Almost nothing, just one little thing. It's right. It wasn't who he was, it's who he knew. He married apparently very well. He married some important daughter of some important guy. You know what that means? Have you ever met a nobody who married a nobody who's a man who married a somebody who's a woman, and he thinks that makes he's important? Do you like those people generally? I mean, I did that kind of, but other than me, right? But other than me, no, really, other than me, right? Oh no, no. These people have egos the size of freight trains, and that's. I mean, again, I'm not just saying that because of this detail. We have seen that all along. For all the accusations and the problems that Tobiah has been. So because he's married into this important family, the father-in-law of this daughter has done this. And he's also, remember, the father-in-law, follow the line here, sworn allegiance to him because his father-in-law was this guy who apparently was somebody, and because his son was important and married somebody important just like his dad did. Hear what that's saying. Tobiah and his son were both important because of dad and grandpa. So whoever that guy was, he must have been a mover and a shaker. And he managed to get his grandson set up well as well. Now, so he supposedly had done all these things. He supposedly was a big shot, hot shot, whatever. Verse 19. They kept telling me what a wonderful man Tobiah was. Think Nehemiah bought any of that? I'm guessing not. Okay, they kept telling him what a wonderful man Tobiah was, and then they told him everything I said. Any comment on that? What do you suppose Nehemiah said? Probably like, oh, sorry, right? I mean, I don't think there was anything real respectful happening here. So Nehemiah, And look, I've already said many times I love the guy. He wasn't afraid to run his mouth. All right? Sometimes you just got to be that way. So I told him everything I said, and Tobiah sent many threatening letters to intimidate me. Why would he do that? What inspired Tobiah to send these threatening letters? Because people were telling him what Nehemiah said. What might that tell us about what Nehemiah said? Exactly, it wasn't nice. All right, verse 7. So we're kind of done with that. Left him stand off to the side and be angry, because I'm sure he was. Verse 7, after the wall was finished, and I hung the doors in the gates, and the gatekeepers, singers, and Levites were appointed, I gave the responsibility of governing Jerusalem to my brother Hanani, along with Hananiah, the commander of the fortress, for he was a faithful man who God feared more than most. Who feared God more than most. What's interesting about that? What did he do here? What does it say he did? He put someone else in charge. Now, yes, it was his brother, but if you remember back to chapter 1, his brother was the one who originally told him what was going on. Remember? When Nehemiah was the bartender back in Xerxes' kingdom, it was his brother who came back from Jerusalem and said, man, things are falling apart back there. Things are terrible. So Nehemiah goes in. He's the transitional leader. He fixes the problem. He gives power back to Hanani. And the reason that's important is, what was the number one accusation Tobiah had been making throughout this entire story? What was he saying? You remember? What was he accusing Nehemiah of? Wanting to be the king. And the first thing Nehemiah does once the project is over is he appoints somebody else. I'm sorry, that's saying this to Tobiah. All right, so he picked a good man, his brother, and he put him in charge. And then he gave his brother some advice. Verse 3. I said to them, do not leave the gates open during the hottest part of the day. And while the gatekeepers were still on duty, have them shut and bar the doors. Appoint residents of Jerusalem to act as guards, everyone on a regular watch. Some will serve at their regular post, and some in front of their own homes. All right, let me read this to you again. And the question I'm going to ask you once I'm done reading is, what is he setting up here? Okay, he's setting Hanani to make a system here. And I want to talk about what that system is. Let me read it again. First thing, I said to them, do not leave the gates open during the hottest part of the day. Interesting time to shut the gates, don't you think? During the hottest parts of the day. Now, we could see shut them at night. I mean, we would get that. Why during the hottest part of the day? Now, remember, St. Mary's hot and Israel hot are not the same thing. Hot in Israel is you don't go outside. All right? We think, oh my gosh, it's 80 degrees, and 80 degrees for them is like, hey, put a coat on the kids before they send them outside. All right? We're talking like redonkulous hot. So hot that you couldn't survive out there very long. Which means shut the gate during that time of the day because nobody's out there watching. If you shut the gate, you don't need a guard anymore. And the guard can go be in the shade and drink lemonade or something. What he's setting up is a system to protect the city. Close the gate if nobody's watching. Holy crap, why do I have to keep saying this? That's what he's telling them. All right, so that's the first thing he says. Close the gate during the hottest part of the day. And and while the gatekeepers are still on duty, have them shut and bar the doors. So before they take off, shut the door. Appoint residents of Jerusalem to act as guards, everyone on a regular watch. Some will serve at regular posts, and some in front of their homes. First ever in the history of the world, neighborhood watch program. That is exactly what this is. If you see something, say something. If something don't seem right, go ask your neighbor what's going on. If you see smoke at a time of the day you shouldn't see smoke, go find out why. If you hear yelling that you don't normally hear, go ask questions. If there are people running down the street and you don't normally see people running down the street, find out what they're running from. Maybe you should start running too. I don't know. But the idea is be responsible for your space. Close the door if you open it. If you're not going to watch it, lock it. And you are responsible for your house, watch in front of your house, but you're also responsible for the community. which means your eyes need to be on your neighbor's house too. What was it, yesterday morning, we saw the police in front of our house. We wake up, it's a little after 5 in the morning, and we're downstairs, and you see the flickering lights. We knew exactly what it was. And what did we do? So we went out and looked to see what was going on, to see if they were chasing somebody down the road. We never did figure out what was happening. Yeah, the ambulance was there and everything. So, but if you see something like that, go find out what's going on, or at least be aware that it's happening, because we're being responsible for each other. We're building a community here. Now, this seems second nature to us, because every single one of us grew up in a community. These people didn't. Remember, this city got built yesterday. It didn't exist prior to that. Now, their ancestors lived in cities, but they had not. They were in exile. When they're in exile, who gives a crap? If somebody's down there stealing from the slave driver, what do I care what happens to him? I wished I was the one stealing it. But now he's saying, be responsible for what's going on. This community don't belong to them. It belongs to you. You are responsible for what happens there. If something bad happens, you own a piece of that. So go ask questions. Watch out for your neighbor. Love each other. Preserve. That's what they're talking about. It doesn't mean you need to be hateful. It certainly doesn't mean you automatically need to be violent and destroy and punish and whatever else. But it does mean you have a responsibility for people's legacy, for their property, and all these different things. So keep an eye on that. Okay, so building a town with people who don't understand how towns work. Okay, so that's his thing. If you open it, lock it, be responsible, so on and so forth. Verse 4. At that time, the city was large and spacious. I was in the Middle East in 1997. I can tell you large and spacious is not how you describe anything there now. Packed in on top of each other, that's a little closer. But at that time, it wasn't like that, Nehemiah says. At that time, the city was large and spacious, but the population was small, and only a few houses scattered throughout the city. If you've ever been around Jerusalem today, this is almost funny, because it is packed in a way that we Midwesterners do not understand. Even New Yorkers don't understand the kind of pact we're talking about here. But Nehemiah even the way Nehemiah is writing this, he understands what's going to happen. If you build a successful city, it's going to grow. And that's not necessarily a bad thing unless you grow irresponsibly. If you grow up not caring about your neighbor, if you grow up saying, I'm only worrying about what's mine, I'm only locking my door, I don't care about yours, I'm growing up, we're creating a town where when people cry for help, everyone ignores it. Then when your population gets big, you are in big trouble. Because you got a bunch of people who don't care about each other. That's a problem. And that's what Nehemiah is saying. We're going to build a community that cares about each other. And will fight for each other. Not just cares as in, hey, here's a casserole. It may also be cares like, oh, do you need me to kill this guy that's bothering you? That's the kind of care we're talking about. And that's what they're looking for. Okay, at that time the city was large and spacious, but the population was very small, and only a few houses were scattered throughout the city. So God gave me the idea to call together the leaders of the city along with the ordinary citizens for registration. I had found the genealogical record of those who had first returned to Judah, and this is what was written there. And then we're going to go through all this. I'm obviously not going to read all this because that would be boring, but I will read this first paragraph because there's a few names in here that we may know. Verse 6, here is the list of Jewish exiles in the provinces who returned from their captivity to Jerusalem and the other towns of Judah. They have been deported to Babylon by King Nebuchadnezzar. Their leaders were Zerubbabel. We recognize that name. That's the puppet king, descendant of David. We've talked about him a couple times. Next person, Jeshua. I believe he's come up too. He was one of the priests that was working. Next is not our Nehemiah, but somebody else named Nehemiah that we don't know. Sariah, I don't know. Realiah, Nehemiah. Okay, Mordecai. There's one we know. What book of the Bible to read Mordecai? Esther, that's right. Esther was raised by her cousin named Mordecai. Mordecai was a hero in that story. Also picked a fight for no reason with a guy named Haman. So maybe not perfect, but he was a good guy because he saved Esther's life. Bilshan, we don't know. Mizpar, I don't know. Bigvay, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I have to go check. I think his name also shows up in Esther. Small part. He was one of the temple workers, but we've seen his name before. Rehum shows up in, I believe, Ezra. He was the governor that somebody wrote a letter to say, hey, you know, Ezra's doing all this stuff he's not supposed to do or something. He was one of the leaders there. And Baana, I do not know. And this is the number of the men of Israel who returned from exile. Now, this is something I found fascinating. If you remember the very first week, I told you that Ezra chapter 2 and the genealogy from Nehemiah chapter 7 are the same genealogy. Well, I went back to test that theory. Actually, it's not. Okay? I'm sure there's a reason for this, more than we're going to be able to get in tonight, but they're not exactly the same, but they almost are. And let me show you why. I have this comparison sheet. Whoever asked me really nicely, I have one copy of it. I'll give it to you if you're interested, but I only have one. But what I did is I put Ezra chapter 2 in one column, and I put Nehemiah chapter 7, and I compared them, and they are almost the same, but not exactly. And let me show you what I mean. Okay? If you got your Bibles there, follow along in Nehemiah chapter 7 as I read Ezra chapter 2. Okay. We're going to go through these kind of quick. Porash, 2,172. And then we have Shephaniah. I'm just going to do the numbers. All right, 372. Next one, family of Arah. Ezra chapter 2 says 775. Not the same, right? But it's not that far off. Nehemiah says 652, right? Next number, family of Porath and descendants of Jeshua and Joab. Number 2,812. Where in Nehemiah is 2,818. It's 6 off. I don't know why. 6 different. I don't know why. Next, Eliam is the same. Zatu, 945. Exactly 100 off from Nehemiah. Zakeh, 760. That's the same. Bani, 642 in Ezra. 648 in Nehemiah. 6 off. Again, that's what I said. Very close, but not exactly. Bibe, 623 in Ezra. Asgard, big discrepancy here. Asgad is 1,222 in Ezra. 2,322 in Nehemiah. Next, Adodikam is 666 in Ezra. 667 in Nehemiah. 1 off. Big Vay, Ezra, 2,056. So again, just 12 off. Aden, 454 in Ezra. Next one, 98. That's the same. Okay, now in Nehemiah, now you have the family of Hashum, not mentioned at all in Ezra. Okay. Next, Bezai, Ezra says 323, and it's 324 in Nehemiah. 1 off. Again, I don't know why. Jorah, 112, and now here's Hashum, which is the one they skipped. 223, so it's 6 off. Then there's Gibbar, which is the next one, 95. That's the same. Now, Nehemiah lists Bethlehem and Netophath in one line, 188. In Ezra, he breaks them into 2 lines. It's the people of Bethlehem, 123, and Netophath, 56. So the number isn't the same, but he breaks them into 2 different ones. Anathoth, 128, that's the same. Next to 42 is the same. 743 is the same. 612 is the same. Michmash, 122 is the same. Bethel and Nehemiah says 123. Ezra says 223. Nebo, it's called West Nebo in Nehemiah. And Ezra, it's just Nebo, but 52 is the same. Next, Ezra has a place called Migbash, which is not mentioned in Nehemiah. Then we got West Elam, 1254, which is the same. Haram, 320, which is the same. And then now we got a change in the order. Ezra lists Lod, Hadid, and Ono first and lists them at 725, which are 721. So again, I don't know. It's very close, but not exactly right. So what does that tell me? Because you know, I love speculating. I can only surmise They must have counted twice. So they must have taken counts at different times. I just think it's fascinating that because it's not like a few of them are way off, and there's different places and listed different ways, but the order is, again, almost identical. And that, so my only speculation is they must have counted twice or taken them at different times, and the scribe must have had the list from the first time, the second time, and just a bunch of stuff, which just goes to show that some people take paperwork very, very seriously, and some people don't. That's all I can come up with from there. So, is that an interesting revelation? I found that to be a little fascinating. For what it's worth, they're very, very similar, but not the same. It would have made a nice slide, Jack. You were absolutely right. Okay, so all right. Since I don't have slides because I'm derelict at teaching Bible study, we're going to go down to verse 61, chapter 7, verse 61. And I'm not reading this, but if you go down here quickly, you'll just notice a bunch of names. There's a guy named Barzillai who tried to get in through his wife's name, and that doesn't go well for him. And basically some money, some different things. Okay? Questions about any of that? Yes?
In the Living Bible, they were talking that since they had lost their genealogies, they could no longer be priests. But they didn't get into that low status of, they get into the same low status as the Samaritans who had stayed back.
Probably. I don't know that for fact. My guess would be yes. Yep. That's why who you belong to, I mean, literally, it's not it's kind of who you are, but who you are is based on who you know. And that would have been an important distinction because who you belong to was everything. Again, guys, this fight is still happening today. And we see it going on right now. It's the same fight that's been going on a long time. Who you belong to is a big deal. And who belongs where is a big deal. It's a fight they've been fighting for 3,000 years. So, all right. Okay, let's go on here to chapter 8. Now in mid-autumn, when the Israelites had settled their towns, all the people assembled together as one person in the square just inside the water gate. They asked Ezra the scribe to bring out the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had given for Israel to obey. What is the book of the law of Moses? Anybody know which book of the Bible that is? Leviticus. Anybody here read Leviticus? Looked at it? Know anything about it? It's more don'ts than do's, but yes. All right. Please notice. I'm going to read this to you again. Now in mid-autumn, when the Israelites were settled in their towns, all the people assembled together as one person in the square just inside the water gate. They asked Ezra the scribe to bring out the book of the law of Moses, which the Lord had given for Israel to obey. I have served churches for 25 years. Not one time have I ever had a congregation say, Pastor Tim, you know what book we want to hear from? Leviticus. No one has ever said that. Yet, they did. Yeah. I've had a lot of people say that. Yeah. Why would they say that? What is it about Leviticus that they want to hear? Why do we want to be told that I can eat grasshoppers, but I can't eat willy worms? Why is that? Because that's what's in the book. And why do I want to say that if I have a bull that gores once and it gores twice and then I have to throw it off a cliff? Why do I want to read about that? What is it about the law of Moses, the book of Leviticus, that they want to hear? Exactly. Nobody else has rules like this. 613 rules. What reading of this book does is it connects us to our heritage. Again, to us, that sounds like the worst thing ever. I mean, can you imagine how bored those kids would be if I walked down there and read the Declaration of Independence to those kids? That's exactly what would happen with what you just did. I don't even know if I can read it to you guys and keep your attention that long, right? Because we don't feel that, but they did. And I'll tell you, our culture being that way is to our detriment. That's not good for us. Not to give away too much, here in a couple weeks, Don is going to do the sermon the week before Thanksgiving. He's going to do the sermon. I tell you, one of the sections he's going to read is he's going to read a section from the Declaration of Independence. He's going to read a section of that in his sermon. Why? Because it's good to be reminded of that stuff. And it's a very good point he's going to make, because that's our heritage. That's who we are. We are a culture. All right, Pastor Tim's getting on the soapbox now. You ready? We are a culture who tears down our statues. We try to cancel our history. We don't want to teach it to our kids. We want to pretend it didn't happen. And we want to go around and apologize for it. That is wrong in every way. Are we perfect? No. Have we made mistakes? Absolutely. Are there people and stuff that we owe apologies to? Yes. But that doesn't make us bad. And that's the part that just irritates me, is when that's what we do, because there's a lot of good things that we've done. These people who are here, they're still doing bad things today. Go watch the news. More bad stuff happened today based on this. But they don't shy away from that. They say, read us Leviticus. Read us our heritage. Tell us who we belong to, because it's being set aside that we become who we are. We today, we just cancel that. We just put it out the window. And again, that is not to our credit. That is the dumbest idea we ever had. And until we get away from that, and yes, I'm not saying, we go around and say America is the best just all the time. I'm not saying that. But to say that we're the worstest all the time, that's not better. It's not even good. And that's why we should want to be connected to the heritage. We should want to read the Gettysburg Address. We should want to read the Bill of Rights. We should want, because that's who we are. And by pretending that stuff is evil and not even bothering teaching it to our kids, we are making an unbelievable mistake. And these people know what that's like, because again, they had been in exile for 70 years. They knew what that connection meant, because they had to keep it when they weren't even home, where they were gone. And so now they're saying, guys, we're here, back. Look at this wall. It's awesome. Look at the temple. It's beautiful. Now, read us the words. Read us the words of the book. Not just a good book, the book. Read that one to us, because that is what connects us to who we are. And the longer we spend pretending we don't have any of that, or that what we do have is bad, the more we are rotting our culture at the base. And again, love me some Nehemiah, but that's the lesson he's teaching, because he is going to insist it be this way. When they say, hey, we need to reinstitute the practices of our ancestors and bring back the festival of shelters and all this stuff, Nehemiah's like, you betcha. You betcha that's what we're going to do, because that connects us to who we are, and it makes us belong. So I'm not saying that if you guys come Sunday and try to troll me and say, hey, Pastor Tim, read Leviticus, I'm still not doing it. But it's the sentiment I'm getting to, okay? You all hear that? It's the idea that we need to be connected to something important, and that's exactly what these people understood. All right. I'm just going to set the soapbox right there in case I need to get back on it. All right. Chapter 8. So on October the 8th, Ezra the priest brought the scroll of the law before the assembly, which included, look, you want to talk about showmanship? Listen to what I'm about to read you. I mean, this is how you do it right. Brought the scroll of the law before the assembly, which included the men and the women and all the children. Again, that doesn't sound like a big deal to us. We're a mixed group here tonight. We've got kids just down the hall, and we got men and women here in this room. That was a little unheard of in those days. But they said, ain't nobody getting left out on this. This is for everybody. This is actually the Bible being very progressive here. So bring everybody out. Let's everybody hear. That's okay. It's including the men, the women, all the children old enough to understand. They faced the square just inside the water gate from early morning until noon and read aloud to everyone who could understand. All the people paid close attention to the book of the law. I'm going to read that again. All the people paid close attention. Maybe I will read some Leviticus on Sunday. We'll have to see now. And get all the people to pay close attention. Ezra the scribe stood on a high wooden platform that had been made for the occasion. Showmanship, guys. Yeah, we built the wall, but we also put this little stage here for our buddy Ezra to read this life-altering book, the book of Leviticus. Ezra the scribe stood on a high wooden platform that had been made for the occasion. To his right stood those guys, and to his left stood a few other guys. Verse 5. Ezra stood on the platform in full view of all the people. He was up where everybody could see him. And not because we thought he was pretty. It's because he was the priest. He's the guy. And we want to hear what he has to say. Ezra stood on the platform in full view of the people. When they saw him open the book, they rose to their feet. Now, in those days, we don't open books like this. Okay, that's not how books open. Books open like this. Okay, so he brought the scroll out, kissed it. I'm sure he did. He set it on probably something very similar to this, and he started rolling. People are like, "Oh yeah, here it comes," and they all rose to. He didn't say, "Please stand to do this." They knew to. They were excited. They rose to their feet. What a powerful image that is. Then Ezra praised the Lord, the great God, and all the people chanted, "Amen, amen." What does amen mean? What does the word amen mean? So be it. They're saying whatever he reads, we are in. We endorse it completely, including the grasshopper thing, including the bull that gores once and gores twice, all that stuff. We endorse the whole thing. So be it. And they lifted their hands toward heaven, and they bowed down and worshiped the Lord with their faces to the ground. Friends, this is not an awesome worship band. This is an old guy they probably could barely hear reading the book of Leviticus, the most boring book in the Bible. And this is their response. These people are excited about being connected to what they had. This is not a boring exercise for them. All right, now the Levites, that group of guys there, instructed the people who were standing there. All right, let me read a little more and I'll tell you how this worked. They read from the book of the law of God and clearly explained the meaning of what was being read, helping the people understand each passage. So the way this would work is the priest, the main guy, Ezra, up on the platform, he would read, "You may eat bugs that have double joints in their legs, but not bugs that can eat single joint." Passage from Leviticus. Okay, don't any of you go eat bugs. But okay, so that they would say that, everyone would hear that. Ezra would then stop, and all these other priests would come up and say, "I picked the worst passage." Okay, the reason that we only eat those bugs is because of cleanliness reasons. Now, the law says this, and this is ceremonially unclean, and we got to stay away from this. They did that because they didn't want the people to hear it and become robots and do it. They wanted the people to understand. This is a sermon that's going on here. The exact same thing that we do every Sunday here. And what they do, so they say, here is the scripture passage. It's beautiful. It's wonderful. Take it into you. But don't just hear it. Do it. I mean, they're echoing the book of James 500 years before James wrote that book. And the only way you're going to be able to do it is you got to understand it. Anybody, look, all of you have dealt with kids at one time or another. Do you want to go through every time and explain why we don't dance in front of the camera while Parker's trying to pray? Sorry, I didn't mean to embarrass you. But do we go? No, we just want it to stop. All right, we're not going to take time to explain. And that's exactly what's happening here. They don't want people just saying, "All right, well, that one's not a grasshopper. I can't eat that one, but that one is, so I can't." They don't want them saying that. They want to understand why that's happening, the explanation of it, because you can't internalize something until you understand it, until you comprehend it. And that's what's being set up here. We're going to tell you what the scripture says, and it's awesome, but we also want you to, we want that not to just be something you hear. We want that to become something you are. And that's why we have sermons. Yeah, I want you to hear the word as the pastor of the church. I certainly want you to hear the word. Don't get me wrong. But I also want you to know why it's important. And I know a lot of pastors will say, like, "Hey, it's important because God said it." All right. But remember, God said it because it was important also. So if you can't internalize it, if you can't own it in that way, what good is it? It's a bunch of goofy words. And that's what's happening here. They're helping the people, including the children, begin to understand what these stories mean. To bring it into our context, what does it really mean that Jesus walked in the water? Or what does it mean when Jesus, called Lazarus out of the grave? What do those stories mean? That's the sermon every week. We talk about those things. And that's why they're there. All right. I'm not sure I got all the way off the soapbox from last time. I'm still on it. I lost where we were at. Verse 9. Then Nehemiah the governor, Ezra the priest and scribe, and the Levites who were interpreting for the people said to them, "Don't weep on such a day as this, for today is a sacred day before the Lord." All the people had been weeping as they listened to the words of the law. Do you think that this meant something to these people? There's a lot of people who cry when they read Leviticus, but not because they're emotionally overwhelmed. All right, I can promise you that. But these people did because that connection was so powerful to them. It was so important to them. Something that they never wanted to neglect or take for granted ever again. Now, eventually they did, but in this moment, in this place, and you all have been in those high holy moments. A particular worship service where something impacted you, or an Emmaus walk, or a retreat that you've been on. You've all been on something like that. And you've had that moment where you walk away and go, it's like an appetizer of heaven. Not the whole thing, but just like a sample. And man, those moments are incredible. And that's what these people were having. And I have to say this again because I like running things into the ground. They had this experience hearing the book of Leviticus being read. All right? Not exactly the Bible's most uplifting book, but they were so excited by that that's what they wanted. All right, so they said, and Nehemiah continued, "Go and celebrate with the feast of choice foods and sweet drinks, and share the gift of food with people who had nothing prepared." All right, we're going back to what Nehemiah was actually doing earlier. Listen to what he says. Celebrate with food. I mean, that part we get. We got that part down. We're good there. And share gifts of food with people who have nothing prepared. This is a sacred day before the Lord. Don't be dejected and sad, for the joy of the Lord is your strength. Again, not the happiness of the Lord, not the blessings of the Lord, the joy of the Lord. And let me tell you a little something about joy. Happiness is an emotion. Joy is a choice. All right, and that's what they're getting to here. The choice to rejoice in the Lord, that makes you strong, because that's a decision that you make. And let me tell you something. I don't care what you ever think. Emotions do not make you strong. Now they can do other things, and I'm not castigating them as evil, but they don't make you strong. They don't make good choices. They don't lead to things that last. They're fleeting. They may not be based on reality. A lot of things, but choices, decisions based in reality, those change things. And that's what Nehemiah is saying. That's what Ezra is saying here. He's saying the choices that you make are going to be what makes you strong or makes you weak. I would highly recommend you choose joy, but you don't have to. You're going to regret any other choice, but you can do whatever you want. All right, so the people are super fired up. Everything's going well. All right, so they're now ready for the first celebration. Verse 13. October 9th, the family leaders and priests and Levites met with Ezra to go over the law in greater detail. And that sounds fun. Gosh, we've already been at this for how long? So we're going to go over in greater detail. So maybe the bigger grasshoppers and not the smaller ones. You guys got nightmares about grasshoppers tonight. As they studied the law, they discovered the Lord had commanded through Moses that the Israelites should live in shelters during the festival to be held that month. Oh, we're supposed to be doing this. All right, so we got to get out there in shelters. He had said that in a proclamation that would be made throughout their towns, especially in Jerusalem, telling the people to go to the hills and get branches from the wild olive, myrtle, palm, and fig trees. They would use these branches to make shelters in which the people would live during the festival as prescribed by the law. If I'm not mistaken, and I might be, but I think the festival shelters, does that come from the book of Esther? Or reminder of rescue from Egypt. Okay, so it must go back farther than that. It must have been from the plagues, when the Israelites left Egypt so fast they didn't have time to build anything, so they just kind of lived in what they could get along the way. All right, so the people went, and remember, that makes sense because they're being connected to their history. And one of the celebrations of their history is we all go live in shelters. So let me ask you, before I finish up here, what are some modern practices to remind us of our heritage do we have today? And it's not a trick question. We have some. What are they? The Pledge of Allegiance is an excellent example. We say the Pledge of Allegiance because it reminds us of our heritage. Excellent. Very good. What else? Star Spangled Banner. We sing that very patriotic song, and that reminds us of our heritage. Excellent. Think of any others? Certain holiday. Thanksgiving reminds me thankful, which is our heritage with the Pilgrims and the Indians. The 4th of July is the one I was thinking of. Question: do they have a 4th of July in England? Yes, they do, because they don't go from the 3rd to the 5th. I'll give you a second. Come on, guys, it's late. All right. Yeah. So yes, so they don't celebrate the 4th of July, but they have one. Some of you still don't get it. I'll explain to you later. So, all right. But the idea we do these things, we shoot off the fireworks and stuff to remind us of what we have. And there are plenty of other examples we could cite, but those are some great ones. Okay, so in order to celebrate their thing, since they don't have fireworks and they don't have barbecues, verse 16. So the people went out and cut branches and used them to build shelters on the roofs of their houses, in their courtyards, and in the courtyard of God's temple, or in the squares just inside the water gate and the Ephraim gate. So everyone who had returned from captivity lived in these shelters for 7 days of the festival, and everyone was filled with great joy. They basically went camping for a week. Okay, that's essentially what they're doing here. The Israelites had not celebrated this way since the days of Joshua, son of Nun. And you know the book of Joshua. I mean, we have a book of Joshua all the way back that far. Ezra read from the book of the law of Moses on each of the 7 days of the festival. Then on October the 15th, they held a solemn assembly as the law of Moses required. All right, questions about that?
They say in here,
Yeah.
my
Mhm.
commentary, that there's so many feasts that
Mm-hmm.
they study. This was the Feast of the Tabernacle.
Yeah,
that they were studying.
tabernacle means shelter. It's the same word.
That's what,
Yeah. And then there's a whole list of different things. This is just one. And the only reason they observe this one is because it happened to be that time of the year to do that one. We wouldn't say, hey, we're going to start celebrating Christian holidays, and we're going to start with Christmas in April. I mean, we just don't do that. Yeah. So it just so happened that was the next one up. Very good. Okay. October 31st, the people returned for another observance. This time they fasted and dressed in sackcloth and sprinkled dust on their heads. This one does not sound as much fun as the last one. Those of Israelite descent separated themselves from all the foreigners and confessed their own sin and the sins of their ancestors. The book of the law of the Lord, their God, was read aloud for them for about 3 hours. Anybody? 3 hours? 3 hours? No takers? All right. Then for 3 more hours, did you think we were just going to buy just for 3? Haha. 3 more hours, they took turns confessing their sins and worshiping the Lord their God. What if I said that? All right, we're going to have a 6-hour worship service. We're going to spend 3 hours so I can read the entire book of Leviticus to you. And then after that, we're going to spend another 3 hours sitting around tables confessing sins. Who's in? That is exactly the number I expected. So yeah, but that's what they did. And let me tell you something. If you're really going to get down and do something like this, if you're really going to sit around the table and say, I struggle with this, yesterday I was, I did this thing that was bad, you're not going to say that to just anybody. If you're going to sit around a table and say, I'm upset about this, I hurt about this, you may stand up and say, the Cleveland Browns they're not a very good football team. You might say that to somebody you don't know, or you might say, I can't believe those 2 teams got in the World Series. I don't even remember which 2 it was, but whatever those 2 teams was, I can't believe the Reds didn't make it or something. You're not going to, you would say that to just anybody because that's dumb stuff nobody cares about. But you would not say, I'm brokenhearted about this thing. You wouldn't say that to just anybody. You wouldn't say legitimately, my life has been crushed by this thing. You wouldn't say that to just anybody. Those relationships are ones that mean something to you. The fact that they spent 6 hours doing this, to all of us, we're like, oh my gosh, how in the world? But this was a building of community. Again, these people didn't know what community was. It was a whole new concept to them. But they were building community, and they were doing that by sharing their deepest hurts, because that's what builds people. You may find out from me that I love comic book superheroes. Do you suddenly feel like you're my best friend by learning that? Probably not, because everybody knows that. But if I told you something personal, which I'm not going to do right now, but if I did, and you and I were off to the side, and I said, I'm always, I've had some abdominal problems in my life, and one of the biggest things that scares me is that they may come back, and that's a legitimate thing. That is a personal detail I'm sharing with you. All right, that's a lot more than Pastor Tim likes Batman. That's not a big deal. And so we're talking about the level of sharing. If they're going so far as to confessing sins to each other, they are building a pretty powerful community in this place, and that's what they were doing. Okay, 3 more hours worshiping the Lord. Verse 4. Some of the Levites were standing on the stairs, crying out to the Lord their God. Their names were, and then there's a bunch of people here. All right, we're gonna go. Actually, I don't know that I want to save this for next week. We will finish chapter 9, and we will go. We will finish Nehemiah. Whether or not we're done, we're going to be finished with Nehemiah next week. So here's going to be your homework. I would like for you, if you don't mind, read the rest of the book of Nehemiah. It's only a handful more chapters. It's not a whole lot. Read the rest of the book of Nehemiah. Bring any questions with you next week. Something that happens. And please do not get bogged down, because there's a few genealogies in here. Read them very, very quickly. All right? But some of the detailed stuff that are in here, and we will discuss all them next week. Second part of your homework in there is, the following week we're going to have the farmer's dinner, which will be November the 8th. We're going to serve. So we're still having this. We're just going to be serving. And then we're going to have about, by my calculations, I think 2 more Wednesday nights. I don't have my phone on me. Somebody look at their calendar. We're not going to meet the 22nd. I think that only leaves 1 week, doesn't it? So you got 1 week, which will be the 15th. Nobody's disagreeing with me, so I'm assuming that's right. So we got that 1 week. Yeah, 1 week I'm going to give you request. So if you got some topic in the Bible that I could cover in 1 week, the 15th is your time. So you have to you can't come the 15th and expect me to, off the top of my head, tell you something. But that's going to be your homework. So some book of the Bible that you'd like to go over. I know the book I'd like to go over with you is the book of Philemon in the New Testament, because Philemon is a pretty fun book. So if you don't give me one, that's what you're getting on the 15th. But if you got something you'd like to do, I will let this be a democracy until I veto it. So that's how that works. So you guys enjoy Nehemiah still? Yeah, I did the soapbox thing a little bit tonight, but sometimes that's fun too. So, all right. So next week we're going to finish Nehemiah. The following week we're going to help with the farmer's dinner. The third week from now we're going to have either your requested or Philemon, whichever it happens to be, and then we'll have Thanksgiving. After that, we will come back for an Advent study of some kind that I have yet to be determined. Ezra's a bunch of genealogies. We can go back and look at that, but there's not much left in there. So if you want to look at the end of Ezra, see if there's something there, but most of that I think was the listing of names for the most part. So if there's some text in there or something, we can go dig into that a little. All right, thank you all for coming. For those of you who want to head upstairs or head downstairs and see what the kids are doing, I'm going to encourage you to do that. Go build that cloud of witnesses, and we'll see you on Sunday.